Well, amid your busy, mundane workday, take a moment to transport yourself to the beautiful hilly state of Uttarakhand, located at the foothills of the Himalayas, which is home to several religious places and magnificent temples. Many say it's where the gods walked on earth. To talk more about the history and heritage of this state, I have with me the author of this new book, Beyond the Misty Veil, Aradhana Johri, who believes these temples are virtual poetry in stone, where every stone tells a story. She's a senior retired IAS officer and has long served in UP and Uttarakhand governments as well as center, and is passionate about preserving the heritage. Thank you, ma'am, for joining me. Please tell our viewers what your book is about.
I think before I say what my book is about, I'd like to say why I wrote this book. And the reason I wrote it was I served in Uttarakhand. In fact, I started my studies there in class one when my father was posted there. And 30 years later, I myself got posted as district magistrate. And I realized that, people are talking about nature, adventure, but nobody is really talking so much about the temples. And that's when I decided that I will write this book. It took several years because I was busy in my schedule. And finally, well, a date and time did come and I wrote the book. So, what my book is about, I have tried to capture these temples from the point of view of their architecture, their folklore, their mythology, their history, and try to tell the tales capture the tales that these temples tell. For example, very, very important parts of our mythology have taken place here. There's a temple called Triyugi Narayan, where they say the celestial wedding of Lord Shiva and the goddess Parvati took place. There is this Vyas Gufa and Ganesh Gufa, where the Mahabharata was written. There is a place called Dodital, where Lord Ganesha was born. Harshil, the beautiful place where everybody loves to go. And frankly, if you ask me, that's what I find the most beautiful place in our whole country. That is where Lord Vishnu was turned into a stone, Harishila. And that's why it's called Harshil. Or where Lord Shiva, after he consumed the poison to save the universe after the Amrit Manthan, when the Kalkut Halahal came out, so he went to Nilkant Mahadev and did tapasya to ease the burning. So that is also a place in Uttarakhand. Or where our Adi Guru Shankaracharya, he got enlightenment in Jyotireshwar Mahadev in Joshimat. So all these places have, these temples have a very strong connect with our past and with our religious texts. And our Skand Puran, it has chapters called Manas Khand and Kedar Khand, which are devoted to this region of Uttarakhand itself. And many of the temples mentioned in it are actually still found in place at the moment.
When you started to write this book, apart from the love for heritage that you have, these are all spaces in Uttarakhand which are considered religious spaces and probably, very Brahmanical gods. So how do you think this book can reach out to people who are wanting to look at Uttarakhand beyond just being religious places?
These, first of all, I will say that they do have a very strong religious context, and that is their strength. But they go beyond that. You mentioned two things. One is the Brahmanical gods. There are also folk deities which are really important, colorful, and revered. Like, for example, Mahasu, the god of justice, or Golu, who's the god of justice. Then Ghandakaran, who's a Pishach, but then who became the Dwarpal of Badrinath because of his devotion to Lord Vishnu. And but apart from that, it's also, it's such a beautiful journey for me. It's been a tremendous journey writing the book itself. Visiting a personal experience. I had an accident several years ago when I was representing the country in an international conference. My car had fallen down the hill and I injured my knees, and I was in a wheelchair for several months. So I didn't know that I would ever walk properly again, leave alone climb mountains. And every temple is located either on the top of the mountain or right below next to the river.
Right.
And I remember the first journey I did was to Gomukh, which is the source of the holy Ganga. And I really thought I would die. And every step I took was that I thought it's the last step I'll ever take in my life. And then I did it. But it was such a beautiful journey, where the terrain changes, where the topography changes, where the vegetation changes, and the beautiful Himalayas are there. So it was absolutely, I can say the journey was as beautiful as the destination.
Right. It's so interesting you talk about it, ma'am, but I was coming to that the next that the terrains of Uttarakhand, I have actually been to some of these places myself. I've explored Uttarakhand and I've hiked to a lot of places, and I know that it's a very tough terrain. But apart from hikers or apart from people who would otherwise want to go and travel, where all have you explored all of these places, and which of them was the most challenging for you?
It's very difficult for anybody in one lifetime to explore all these places. So I also have not been able to do it, but I have been fortunate to be able to cover quite a bit. When I started writing this book, I was member in the Central Administrative Tribunal in Delhi. And every vacation I got, I would head to Uttarakhand, take a couple of days of leave, and do all these various temples. And if you ask me, I mean, it's so varied, right from the west, where you get the Tons, beautiful Tons Valley. Incidentally, the Tons is called the Tamsa or the Karmnasha. It is supposed to be a very unlucky river because it is supposed to have come from the tears of the Kauravas after the Mahabharata. But right from there, then you come to the Yamuna Valley, the Ganga Valley, then you go further east, and you have all those beautiful Himalayas, the Chokhamba, the Nilkant, and all these beautiful peaks, Nanda Devi, of course. So it's a beautiful state. And if you're asking me which was the most difficult or whatever, one of the most interesting and challenging was certainly the trek to a place called Madhya Maheshwar.
Okay.
Uh, this is one of the Panch Kedars. The Panch Kedars are holiest of holy for the Shaivites, and they are supposed to be the places where, after the Mahabharat battle, when the Pandavas went to Lord Shiva for forgiveness, he didn't want to forgive them. They had killed their brethren. So he turned into a bull and hid among a flock of cattle, a herd of cattle. And Bhim recognized and chased him. So he went underground at a place called Gupt Kashi,
Uh-huh.
and then 5 parts of the bull emerged at 5 places which are called Panch Kedar. The hump emerged at Kedarnath, which is the most famous. And so one of the Panch Kedars is called Madhya Maheshwar, where his navel is supposed to have emerged. And it's a 15-20 kilometer uphill and then another equal downhill back. So I was trekking there and I mistimed it. So I had some escorts and we were traveling. And late at night, we found ourselves walking in the jungle, a steep uphill climb. And who do you think? But a leopard also gave us darshan before Madhumishwar Mahadev. So, of course, that was wonderful because it gave flight to our feet and tiredness and everything vanished. But that was one very challenging journey because I remember when I reached the top, I just could not even move a muscle. But it was so satisfying, that beautiful place, monal pheasants all around, surrounded by snow peaks, blue sky. And I have covered that area quite a bit in my book also, a couple of photographs, because that was a very memorable journey for me.
Beautiful. But if I was to pick up that book, if you could tell us a little bit about some of the chapters, or like how you have strategically divided the book. How, if I'm a reader and I want to pick up this book and read it, what am I in for apart from heritage and culture? And you've shared some beautiful little stories right now also. How have you written this book? What was your thought process behind how you divided the chapters and how you want a reader to go through this book?
Thanks, Raksha. First of all, I had written the book in the traditional manner, Uttarkashi district, Chamoli district, so and so, so and so. And then I didn't like it. I rewrote the whole thing. And of course, initially, in the first few chapters are just the introduction, which is, a bit of the history of the state, because there's a lot of unwritten history. And a lot of the history you get from these temples. So I've used these temples to show the history, the culture too. And then I've come into the various circuits which could be there. I feel that, the Char Dham everybody knows, which is Yamunotri, Gangotri, Kedarnath, and Badrinath.
Yes.
But there are so many more circuits that could be made, And I'm talking right now, first I'm talking the religious part of it, and then I'll talk about the adventure and the tourism part of it, the other part of it. So the circuits from the religious point of view also can be many. For example, I've talked about unique temples. And this is something that I culled in the course of my travel. There's a temple which opens only one day in a year, which is called Bansi Narayan, in
Right.
a beautiful place called Urgam Valley, which they call Switzerland of the East also over there. It's
Yes.
beyond Urgam Valley. It's a trek, quite a trek. And it opens only one day in the year. The story being that the other days in the year, Lord Narad worships Lord Vishnu, and one day in the year it's open for human worship. So there were similarly so many. There are temples built in the forest, built by one-armed craftsmen because the other arm had been cut off. They're so beautiful, you know. So one chapter I've devoted to unique temples, which I think is really interesting. Then I've talked about the deity, the pillars of Shiva. So I've put together the various Shiva temples and brought out their uniqueness in terms of mythology, architecture, in terms of also the natural beauty that you encounter. Then I've talked about the cult of Shakti because the goddess Durga Bhagavati Kali is very popular there. And incidentally, you know, they say that in the Shakti temple in Uttarkashi,
Mm-hmm.
the trident with which she slew Mahishasur is still supposed to be there. So that's where, you know, mythology merges with history and reality. You don't know what ends where. Then I've talked about lesser other deities, not lesser, but other Brahmanical deities, the folk gods who are really important. And then I've given a little bit of a touch of you cannot talk about Uttarakhand without talking of its towns and its beautiful hill stations with a slightly different lens.
Right.
So I've talked about also the tribes, three tribal areas I've taken, which have their own, unique wild beauty. Be it Munsiari, Dharchula in Pithoragarh on the border with Nepal, or be it this side, be it Jaunsar Bawar, or be it the Tharu Buksas. So I've brought in that cusp of cultures also into it. So I think it would be interesting to people who are lovers of nature, people who are lovers of adventure, because these are all very, very interesting treks. The trek to Dodital, the birthplace of Lord Ganesha, is a beautiful trek, and that lake is absolutely out of the world. So it's so beautiful. As I say, the journey is really so beautiful also. And the religious context makes it even more, shall I say, more sacred also.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all these details, ma'am Johri. We are very excited to read this book. While I'm not somebody who judges a book by the cover, but even the cover is beautiful. Good luck to you, and I can't wait to get my hands on this book. Thank you so much for your time, ma'am Johri.
Thank you so much, Raksha.